So here in this final unit of our class, we're actually going to look at the three branches of government, kind of what government actually is. You probably thought that's what we are going to be doing all year, but no, we're not going to start that till now here in the third 6 weeks. So let's talk about Congress. It's worth mentioning that in the beginning, the framers of our Constitution, the people who created this country, always saw Congress as the key part of the government. They saw Congress as the most important part and really the center of our government. Now that's evolved over time. Although Congress is still arguably the most important part, we don't really think of it that way. But let's understand what it is. The salary, it's raised a little bit now. I think it's a little over 170,000 now. It does get retirement even if you don't serve very long. You get an office in D.C. and you get staff at home and in D.C. You get money for travel, which makes sense. They have to travel back and forth from D.C. to wherever they live. And you get franking privileges. Franking privileges mean you can mail stuff. Now, you're not supposed to mail stuff like campaign literature, but congressmen don't have to use stamps. They get to mail stuff for free. I don't know if that's going to inspire you to become a congressman, but if it does, good for you. They do work long hours. They spend a lot of time away from their family. And, of course, they're under constant pressure to support policies both from interest groups and from regular citizens. This is the 111th Congress. We're about to start the 112th Congress, if I remember right. But I'm going to pull up those statistics separately. We'll come back to this. Who wins elections? The answer is incumbents. If you look at this chart, what you're going to find out is that being the incumbent, already having the job, is the key criteria to getting the job. You'll look there. There has been exactly 4 times, in the last, since 1958, where fewer than 90% of incumbents won their race in the House. And as you can see in the Senate, it's a little tougher. There are a couple of rough years there in 76 and 80 for the Senate. 76, 78, and 80, I should say. But beyond that, you've got a pretty good chance to win if you're already in office. Why? Well, advertising. Most people don't even know who's running for Congress or the Senate. And so if you're already in that job, people probably are familiar with you. Your challenger probably has to first introduce himself and create some name awareness. So that's a huge... Now, and when you're running for president, the media is going to cover you a lot, and people are going to know who you are. When you're running for Congress, not so much. Incumbents have the advantage of being able to frequently return to their area, send out a newsletter through Congress, and they are the congressmen. So, for example, you may have at some point in your life gone to a county fair or an event at the local school or something, and the congressman will be there. And he gets the advantage of being asked to be there in the first place because he holds office and being introduced as a congressman. And this is a big advantage. So whoever your congressman, just think for a minute, have I ever been in the same place as this guy? And if you are, you probably knew because they probably made a big deal about it. But if it's the challenger, if some local businessman or lawyer or something is going to run against him, nobody invites them to speak at county fairs or high school events, and certainly nobody makes a big deal about them being there. They get to claim credit. There's 2 main things that congressmen or senators get to take credit for. One is casework, and this is where they help a constituent in their district. So, for example, if somebody is on Social Security and for some reason their check doesn't show up one month, they might go down to the office of the local congressman and ask him to help. That is, of course, interfacing with the government, right? If you want a pothole filled, well, that would be that's not a congressional issue. That's a bad example. But if you want maybe to start an initiative to get some federal funding to build a new hospital or something, you're going to go work with the congressman. And, of course, if the congressman is able to get that done, he gets to take credit for that, which also leads to pork barrel spending. This is money, federal money, that the congressman brings back from the federal government to his district. So if the congressman were to get money to fix the roads or money to build a school or a hospital, he can come back and take credit for that. I got this money, and then we got all these jobs to build it, and now we have this wonderful new thing, and I get to take credit for it. They might even get their name put on it. Here in Austin, where we live, there's a lot of stuff named after a congressman named Jake Pickle, who was kind of a master at getting pork barrel money brought back to the state. By the way, I should mention pork barrel. Well, we call it pork barrel money because there's this kind of air of corruption about it. One thing I should mention is it's a teeny tiny fraction of the federal budget. There's a lot of politicians will talk as if they can balance our budget and pay off our trillions of dollars in debt by eliminating pork barrel spending. That's ludicrous. It's an infinitesimal fraction of the spending. And the other reality is that money has already been allocated to be spent. It's just the Congress, in most cases, and it just becomes the congressman fighting over who's going to get it. So pork barrel spending is often demonized and made into a much bigger deal than it is. They get to take positions. They portray themselves as hardworking, dedicated to the needs of the people. And think about this for a minute. If I represent a district, particularly if I'm a congressman, but this is true for senators too, what position am I most likely to take? Well, I'm most likely to take the one that the people I represent agree with if I want to get reelected. So I've already taken that position. So the people who are going to vote for me agree with position A, well, I take position A. Now the challenger comes along and he's got two choices. He can either take position B, the less popular position in our district, or he can say, well, I agree with the other guy. Well, if you agree with the other guy, why vote for you? And so the ability to kind of stake out the positions that are popular within an area is a huge advantage for incumbents, which kind of makes sense, right? They tend to get weak opponents, particularly for congressmen. People who are inexperienced in politics, don't have a lot of organization, probably don't have a lot of funding. And, of course, campaign spending is the other issue. You have to raise a lot of money to run one of these races. For congressmen, it's usually in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. For senators now, it's into the millions, even tens of millions of dollars. Well, how are you? If you're not in office, it's hard to raise money. For one thing, you have more than a 90% chance of losing, so people aren't real tempted to give you money. Second, the incumbent has a network of people who've been giving him money for a long time, most likely. Third, the incumbent has the ability, if he's trying to, say, get an interest group to help him in his campaign, to say, look, I'm in Congress right now. I can help you right now. That guy may or may not be able to help you if he wins the election. The incumbent might have a war chest, money he has raised in past elections but not spent. Particularly congressmen who have the luxury of running unopposed will just stock up money. And so when somebody does come along to beat them, they've already got the money raised. And then, of course, they continue to raise more money. PACs prefer to give their money to incumbents, which makes sense. PACs typically want something from the politician. They want them to support this policy or vote against that policy. And it's much more effective to donate that money to somebody who's in office and can do something about it than to somebody who maybe one day be in office. Most members represent the majority party in their district. If a district is predominantly Democrat, and it has a Democratic representative, well, it's going to be really hard for the Republican to win because he's got a party disadvantage. Most people are going to vote against him simply because of his party, which gives the incumbent another major advantage. So how do you defeat him? Well, there's really three ways typically that incumbents leave Congress. They retire is the most common way. And then they probably go work for an interest group. Statistically speaking, that's the most likely scenario. They could get tarnished by scandal. We've had fun with lots of people in class who've been tarnished by scandal. They might be caught with a freezer full of cash, as a Louisiana Democrat did. They may be caught having Exxon build a massive extension on their house, as the Republican Senator Ted Stevens from Alaska. They may be caught in some sort of sexual scandal, which may or may not bring them down, by the way. Elliot Spitzer, the governor of New York, resigned when he was caught using a prostitute, while David Vitter, who was apparently a Republican senator from Louisiana, who was a serial user of prostitutes, he had no problem continuing to serve and kept getting and has been reelected since then. But scandal is one way to get people out of Congress. If you become an embarrassment, you're vulnerable to being defeated. Redistricting may take you out. So the state legislature, particularly if they're not in your party, may redraw the district lines in the state to take your reliably safe district that was filled with voters you knew that agreed with your policies and were in your party, and they may redraw your district so you've got a bunch of voters who don't know anything about you, maybe belong to the other party and share the opposite policy positions. And so this is one way state legislatures can wipe out a congressman. You can't do that to a senator, obviously, but to a congressman. And then there's also waves. wave elections where the country throws the bums out and they vote against a particular party. We saw this in 2006, then we saw it again in 2008, and then we saw it again the opposite direction in 2010. And so if you're in a borderline district, you may be washed away in one of these wave elections. Open seats. If somebody retires or for whatever reason isn't going to serve, they get promoted. For example, when Obama and Biden became president and vice president, that opened up 2 Senate seats because they were both senators. They appointed people to the cabinet, Hillary Clinton of New York, Conrad from Colorado. Salazar, from Colorado. And these opened up seats. And that created an open seat. Now here you're going to have a lot more competition. You're going to draw better opponents because there's a sense that either side can win the race. But incumbents do provide stability in Congress. We may re-elect Congress every 2 years, but it's not like Congress gets reinvented every 2 years. In reality, 90% or more of the people who were there in the last term will be there in the next term. Change in Congress is actually a fairly slowly changing body. It typically changes much slower, for example, than the presidency. The courts are probably the slowest to change, but Congress is probably the second slowest to change, and it does create a sense of continuity. Some people have talked about term limits. In 94, for example, the Republicans promised that if they were elected, they were given Congress, they would pass term limits because they said the Democrats have been in there forever and there should be a limit on how long you could serve. Of course, the minute they got elected, the Republicans lost all interest in term limits and made no attempt to pass them. But occasionally, political reformers will point to these as a potential solution.